All right, good afternoon. Let's look at another digital math notebook. This time we're talking about converting decimals to fractions. We worked on this September 30th. Let's go ahead and start with our do now, which is on slide 4. So first thing it's saying is drag the boxes to the correct location on the place value chart. Okay, we're looking here, we have our 1,000, our number is 1,234 and 0.567. First thing they show us is hundreds. Hundreds will not go over the hundreds because of that THS at the end. Anything that ends with THS, hundreds, tenths, thousands, 10,000s, means it's after the decimal. The only thing here to throw you off is there's no ones place. Unlike with our greater than 0 place values, we go from what we'll see here, 10,000, 1,000, 100, tens, and the ones. But decimals start at tenths. Don't ask me why, that's what they do. So this is our tenths, and then our hundreds, and then our thousands for our decimals. Now let's place them for our whole values as well. So we have our tens over the 3, the 4s in the ones place, the 2s in the hundreds place, and last, the 1 is in the thousands place. Okay? And then if you want to, you could have placed this one. This would have been the 10,000s, but nothing's here. 10,000s, but nothing's here. Okay, so let's jump down to slide number 6 and put our definitions. A number that is a part of a whole that is always going to be a fraction. Remember, fractions represent a part of something. Think again of pizza, okay? If I bought a whole pizza and I gave you a fraction of my pizza, I didn't give you the whole, I gave you a piece of it, a part of the pizza. Okay, a fraction in which the numerator is greater than the denominator is an improper fraction. We'll talk about numerator and denominators again in just a moment. Whole number and a fraction is a mixed number. That's where you see the big number and then you see the little fraction next to it. The big number and the little fraction next to it. Dividend, the number to be divided in a division problem is going to be dividend. Divisor is a number that we are dividing by. So our divisor will be, for example, we have 30 divided by 5. 30 is a dividend. 5 is a divisor. Alas, a number based on the number of tenths parts. Okay, so tenths, hundreds, thousands is going to be a decimal. Okay, let's move on to the next slide. So this is a great tool to look at to remind you of your place value. It's the same thing as your do now, but it's just right here before you. When changing decimals to fractions, it's important to know, like you said, place value. Yeah, place value. Sorry with my voice, it's acting weird. So how to go about doing this? The place value of a decimal is what the denominator will be in the fraction. So for example, and I'm gonna write this to the side as well to help you guys out. We have our decimal here of 0.65, or as we're gonna start saying it, we're gonna try to say it by its place value. We know the place value by looking, sorry, that's a really bad 6. We know the place value by looking at our decimal, looking at whatever number is furthest to the right and figuring out what place value it's in. In this case, the 5 is in the hundreds place, so I won't say 0.65, I will say 65 hundredths, okay, 65 hundredths. Since it's in the hundreds place, okay, that means that my denominator on my fraction is going to be 100. Whatever place value is in will decide what the denominator is. As a refresher, your denominator is down at the bottom. That's another way to remember it. D, denominator is down. Numerator is number 1, so it's at the top. So in this case, that's such a bad 6, destroying me. In this case, our denominator is going to be 100 because it's in the hundreds place. Let's go to our next part. The numerator is a number you see in the decimal. So our decimal over here was 65 hundredths. So I just take that 65 and that's going to become my numerator. And that's how we convert it. That part is super simple. The part you guys have a little problem with now is simplifying. Oh no. So it's simplifying, we have to find a common factor. Remember, common factors mean that remember that factors are just simply numbers that can be multiplied to equal a number. Numbers that multiply to equal a number. So an example, some factors of 10. 1 times 10. 1 and 10, they're both factors of 10 because 1 times 10 equals 10. Also, 2 and 5, because 2 times 5 equals 10. Let's look at another number, 20. What are some factors of 20? What are some numbers that multiply together to equal 20? 1 and 20. Also 2 times 10. And last, we have just 2 more. We also have 4 times 5. So now common factors means that these two numbers share factors. 1 is a common factor. 2 is a common factor. 5 is a common factor. And also 10 is a common factor between these two numbers. So these common factors I can use to make equivalent fractions. Okay, if I divide 65, or in this case, if I had 10 over 20, if I divided both of them by 10, it would give me an equivalent fraction, which would be 1/2. If I divided them both by 5, it would give me an equivalent fraction, which would be, what is that? 2/4. Okay, so let's go over here now. Now we're looking for a common factor between 65 and 100. In this case, it's actually going to end up being 5 is the greatest common factor. As a trick or a technique to help some of you, okay, if you're still struggling with your division and multiplication. If my number ends with a 5, I know I can divide it or multiply it by 5. 5 times something equals 65, as well as 65 divided by 5 will give me a whole number. If it ends with a 0, that means there is a factor of 5 and a factor of 10. Okay? So if it ends with a 0, that means that 10 times something equals 100. Also 5 times something equals 100. So now we're going to do division. So we have 65 divided by 5, 100 divided by 5. 65 divided by 5 equals 13. 100 divided by 5 equals 20. So just as the example says, 65 over 100 simplifies to 13 over 20. This is bringing back into play what some of you learned in elementary called greatest common factor. We'll make this very easy for you, and you'll actually do really well in the proportions unit later on too. So take a second on slide number 9. Try to think of what place value will this number be. What's the place value for 75 hundredths? What's the place value for 122? 0.122. What's the place value for 3.02? Well, I think that's the first one next. Hopefully you weren't listening. Okay, so take a second to think about it, and then let's say it together. So for the first number, 0.75. The 5 is the number I'm looking at. The number furthest to the right, it's in the hundreds place. So therefore, this is 75 hundredths. That's why our denominator is 100. That's why the numerator is 75. It's simplified to 3 over 4. 0.122 was in the thousands place. So the denominator became 1,000 over 122, and it's simplified to 61 over 500. And last, 3.02. The 2 is in the hundreds place. What some people get mixed up on is they say thousands. Remember, we're counting from the decimal, not from any number we see, but from the decimal. From the decimal, we have the tenths with the 0 and the 2 and the hundreds. So in that case, this number is 3, whole number stays the same. 2 over 100, which simplifies to 1 over 50. All right, so now with that knowledge, let's try to go ahead and determine what is the place value of these 4 following decimals. I'm gonna give you a second, then we'll go over it. Okay, you should be unpausing your video. For the 0.9, the 9 is in the tenths place, so it is 9 tenths. Next one is 1 hundredths. The next one is 406 thousandths. This one's 42 hundredths. And the last one is 1 and 74 hundredths. So now with this knowledge that we have, let's go ahead and, now that we know the place value, let's practice making them into into fractions. So just like you said, we know that this one was going to be 9 tenths. 9 tenths. I know that my fraction is going to be a 10 for the denominator because it's in the tenths place. And then whatever my decimal is going to be my numerator, so it just becomes a 9. And then I'm checking to see, can I simplify this fraction? In this case, no, because the greatest common factor they both share is 1. If the only factor they share is 1, that means it's in its simplest form. Oops, that line was an accident. Let's go to the next one. This one is in the hundreds place. So now that we know it's in the hundreds, you guys go ahead and solve it out. I'm going to pause for a second. I want you to try to do these last three on your own. Try to do these last three on your own. Okay, so if you finished it, let's go ahead and review and see what you got. So this one is in our hundreds place, like we said. So since it's in the hundreds, our denominator has to be 100. Our numerator is going to be 1. So it's 1 over 100. That's in the simplest form because the greatest common factor they share is 1. Then let's go to this one. This is 0.045. This is actually in the thousands place. Since it's in the thousands place, that means that we can simplify it. I'm sorry. That means that our denominator is going to be 45. Our numerator will be whatever is left over as our decimal. In this case, it was 0.45. We don't need to add that 0. So our answer is 45 hundredths. But we need to check to see, can we simplify it? In this case, yes, we can. Remember what we said about the 5s and the 0s? Because they both have a 5. Well, because one has a 5, one has a 0, that means that both of them can divide by 5. 45 divided by 5 equals 9. 1,000 divided by 5 equals 200. And then we're checking to see if we can simplify it more. They do not share another common factor other than 1. So therefore, this is at the simplest fraction. And the last one is going to be 1 over 74. 1 over 1.74. So this one's in the hundreds place. Since it's in the hundreds place, my fraction is going to be over 100, but do not forget that whole number. Do not forget that whole number. The whole number just comes right over. We don't even mess with the whole number. It just walks right on over, unbothered by everything going on. It just keeps doing its own little thing. And then the 74 is the decimal we have remaining, so the 74 goes to the top. And now we see if we can simplify. Since it doesn't have a 5, that means they both can't divide by 5. So let's start the opposite way. Let's see if they can divide by 2. 74 divided by 2 equals 38. Okay? And 100 divided by 2 equals 50. So therefore, my final answer, this is going to look really bad. See if I can save it. Ooh, it actually came out decent. Oh, yeah. So my 5 went bad, though. My final answer is going to be 1 and 38/50. Okay? Take a second if you need to help you. Slide 14 is there to help review. It's a really great example to help you understand decimal place. Thinking about it as money for those of you who have actually had more than some change in your pocket. And also slide 13 is a great review as well. Talking about examples for your places. You get to say it. This is 1 hundredths, 1 tenths, 2 and 2 tenths, 7 tenths, 23 hundredths, 21 thousandths, and then showing them as decimals and as fractions. Okay? All right, hope this was helpful. Solve the exit ticket on your own. You've got this now. I believe in you. Have a wonderful day.